And welcome back to Creative Thinkers. My name is Miguel Valenzuela, and as always, we bring you somebody very interesting. Today, we have somebody who's taking care of us locally, and I'll explain that in a moment. Her name is Erica Marin, and she is currently the director of the El Paso Museum of History. She is also a creative individual, and we'll find a little bit more about her today. Erica, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show, Miguel.
Absolutely. Our pleasure as always, because we try to bring in individuals who are creative. But at the beginning, I always try to kind of get a feel of who the person is, how they grew up, why they are still here in El Paso, and how important it is. So you are a local El Pasoan?
Yes, I was born and raised here in El Paso.
Okay.
And let me see. So I was born in Segundo Barrio. I was born at New York Methodist. My family's from Segundo Barrio, but later moved into Central area around El Paso High. And my parents were both Chicano activists back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And so
that must have been pretty deep and heavy, right?
So yeah, so it does really kind of give you another type of sense of identity, you know. So I do self-identify as Chicana.
Okay. Can you explain what that means for the people that are watching that may not know?
Okay, so Chicana can mean that you're Mexican American, that you have an experience that is rooted in the in-between. And it's also a political identity. It's about how you envision yourself moving in this world and how you fight for self-determination. So that is what Chicanismo is.
Very good. So as a small child, you were very involved with all of this. How in the world did that form you as an individual? Because I believe that it's probably a pretty strong upbringing in many respects.
Well, I think it formed me in the sense that it gave me a sense of social justice. So that carries forward into my adulthood, into my creative work, and into my professional work as well. Always looking at sharing untold stories, always making room for others, creating access for marginalized communities. That's very important. That includes telling untold stories.
And what types of stories? Can you give us an example of one of these stories that you feel was important as far as who you are as an individual? And was it a personal thing, or was this something you heard?
I mean, in some instances it has been personal, but I think all of it is personal because we're human, right? So I think work here on the border is always personal because this is where I'm from. But for example, you know, the everyday person, the history of the everyday individual, not just the rich banker who built a wing of a school or who financed the first museum in town or that sort of thing, but the bracero grandfather who moved his family into Segundo Barrio and whose kids grew up and eventually achieved educational success, those types of stories. Those are the stories that interest us.
And as far as you growing up with lots of influences, can you give us an example of somebody who influenced you in many ways to become the person that you have been? It could be mother, father, it could be somebody else maybe you ran into, maybe in the educational system, who knows?
Sure. Well, I think my experience, like many folks, is multi-pronged, right? I have, of course, that aspect that is kind of a more politicized aspect, the Chicana aspect, but then I also have the creative end of my family. So on my dad's side, both my grandmother and my grandfather were very creative individuals. My grandmother would sew, and I learned to sew from her. Later on, I ended up taking that up and doing that more formally. My grandfather was actually an artisan, a craftsman, artesano, and he was a lathe worker, un tornero.
Oh, really?
So he would make
legs and things like that,
legs, tops, yo-yos,
really?
Chess pieces, chess sets. So molinillos, the things that you make hot chocolate with, all kinds of things. My grandfather was a craftsman. And between my grandmother and her craft as someone that would sew, and my grandfather, I think that's where I got the creative bent and the part that where my talent is very much in my hands, I feel.
And one of the things that we were talking about pre-interview,
Sure.
we were mentioning the fact that you actually started to create things on your own. For example, clothing. You said that your grandmother was a seamstress, and she kind of helped you kind of understand this thing, what it is to sew and how to, hold a needle and how to bring two pieces of fabric together. And you were commenting that one of the stories that she told was that you were the individual that was always there at the foot of the sewing table and kind of dressing your dolls. How do you think that allowed you to be the person that you are today creatively? Because you're observing these things, and now you're allowing people to observe things through the museum specifically. How do you think sitting there and understanding the importance of seeing these small little things and how they affected you help you become who you are?
I think, sewing is not just a skill set, but it also helps you think of things in the round, because a body is round, right?
Correct.
So you can't think of things in 2D, but in 3D.
Correct.
So learning how to put pieces together, how to create a pattern is a creative endeavor. And so her showing me how to do that, and then of course the actual skill of sewing it together was very rewarding, and that kind of opened up that whole part of me. And of course I'm an 80s kid, right? And fashion was such a big thing. We have Madonna, we have all kinds of things going on in terms of fashion in the 80s, and I loved it, and I thought for sure I was going to be a fashion designer.
Right.
That's what I was going to do when I grew up.
But something else happened, right?
But other things happened. That part still happened, but yes, other things happened. I went into high school. I actually started dancing and also doing theater. So I then veered off into the performing arts, and I went into UTEP doing performing arts. But then I returned back to sewing because I really loved the costuming aspect of it.
Right.
And while I was there, other peers and actually some professors said, hey, they have a program at EPCC. And my mother, who's also a counselor here, said, hey, they have a program at EPCC. It's a fashion technology program. Maybe you ought to go do that, get your associates, and then later on afterwards maybe look at FIT or Parsons or something that is some other place that you want to go to school for this. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah. So I got my associates, and that was a lot of fun. But then I ended up getting married, so that didn't, I didn't quite. But I always stayed doing something. And I had a friend who had a boutique, and I would design purses. I would fabricate and make purses and little clutches and that kind of thing. And I made that for a while, and I would sell them consignment at her store.
That's really cool. For me, one of the things that is of utmost importance is kind of being open enough to allow different ideas, concepts, ways of thinking into my life. And it seems that that's what you have done, because thinking outside the box creatively, you were able to kind of maneuver yourself into another avenue. So from that point forward, you graduated from here, EPCC, where we're actually filming the show, and you went into the museum and creative aspect of museum arts.
I mean, honestly.
Explain that.
Yeah, honestly, that didn't come till much later. So, I lived a whole life. I was married, and then I still always did something creative, whether it was just painting for a hobby or sewing or that sort of thing. At some point, I even owned an espresso drive-through.
Wow,
so,
really?
Yeah, so yeah, I dabble a lot.
Very good.
I dabble a lot, and then I went into marketing. I needed to go back into the workforce, and I did marketing for a while. I worked with United Way of El Paso County. Then I moved on to La Mujer Obrera, and I worked there for Café Mayapan and for Mercado Mayapan, and I did marketing there, at which point I started looking at going back to school. And I was at this point a non-traditional student, and I had been working on my art for a while, working in community, and I said, I really just kind of need to buckle down and finish my schooling. But when I went into school, I didn't just want to get a studio art degree. I was very nervous about that, seeing as how so many of my friends and peers struggle to find work. So I heard about a program at NMSU. It was for conservation. So it was museum conservation. So I decided to go into that, and it was a longer track. It's a BFA and very technical. You have to learn chemistry and that whole bit. Yeah. So
you were literally talking about like conservation of artwork.
Yes, museum conservation. So I focused on painting. So my specialty is painting in conservation, and that's what I got a BFA in. And then I came out of that, and I continued to do independent gigs, you know, just independently curating shows, either for friends or myself, or group shows or solo shows for other people, and worked for a while that way. And then went back and got my master's in history. I'm telling you, it's a winding road.
But the beauty of that, and my road has been the exact same thing, just winding all over the place. But getting back to like the concept of what the show is creativity. And I feel like that's one of the most important things for you, because you wouldn't have done all these things if you hadn't been thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I think,
or allowed yourself to do these things, right?
I think it's all a risk, right? So that's one thing that I feel that I do have in my corner. I'm not afraid of risk. So
why do you think that is?
Because I see the possibilities. The imagination doesn't stop, right? So that creative part of me just allows me to take those risks and say, well, you know, who knows? If you don't try, then you won't know. So I've always been a bit of a risk taker. So I'll go out on a limb and try something. And I think that that's very important. That's the creative end of my person. Yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned was the 80s. Same thing here. I can totally assimilate. But one of the things that I've never touched upon here, even though I have interviewed other individuals like Joe Dorgan, for example, if that guy's not 80s, I don't know who is, you know. But what kind of influence do you think that living amongst this kind of very open time has helped you, or how has it helped you become who you are? Because I know that living in a time where there was so much creativity going on, the way that we looked, the way that we acted, the things that we said, the clothes that we wore, all of those things influenced who I am today as an individual. And because of that, I'm able to do so many things where I feel like a lot of people don't feel like they have the capacity to be able to do a lot of different things. How do you think living during that era made you become who you are, and how did it impulse you or help you?
I mean, I don't know about you, but when I think of the 80s, I think of multicolors. I think of lots of colors. I think of wild hair. I think of crazy makeup. I think of Boy George. Yeah. I think of gender bending. I think of all kinds of things that that are unlimited. And I think that that's the part of me that, you know, it was very influential in my childhood. And so I think that's what pushes me forward, is that, like, you know, kind of pushing boundaries, kind of pushing the limits in terms of creativity and in terms of how you can play, whether it's with ideas for history exhibition or for some other kind of program.
And sticking with the whole history exhibitions, you were the current director here at the El Paso Museum of History. And one of the things we were talking about just a few minutes ago was that having this kind of creative idea, creative concepts, different ways of looking at things and incorporating the arts into what we're looking at historically are important. Can you give us some examples of some exhibitions that you have curated that have taken or pushed the boundary of what is artistic, as opposed to just keeping it one-dimensional and just kind of showing us some placards with some information and maybe an old artifact? How do you make it more creative, and how is that important for bringing the people and incorporating them into what you're seeing?
Well, one of the beautiful things about work at the museum is that it's very collaborative work. So it's not just one individual that does that creates, it's all of us together. When I was curator, I did one of the larger successes was low and slow lowrider culture on the border. And that was, of course, again, a group effort, from branding to kind of figuring out how we were going to lay out the area, bringing the community in, really. And this was a beautiful one because we just kind of went very, in a sense, Hollywood. We did a whole black, everything was black in terms of the walls, and it was very, very, very direct lighting on these beautiful like bicycles or motorcycles,
I remember that one. Yes,
or cars, right? So it was very shiny and black with pink and aqua, and I think that was a big deal. It was a big deal for the community. When we had the closing event, we had more than 4,000 people show up on that day. There was a show and shine outside, an informal one, albeit, but everybody showed up in their lowrider, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and I think that was the more creative one, the one where we, at that moment, where we kind of really brought in the audience, and you immersed them in this lowrider culture within this gallery space. And one thing that I love to share a lot is that you want to create these like little worlds. So each gallery should feel like a little world. It should feel like you move into that one and then you move on to something else and then you move on to something else. Since then, I think we've pushed the boundaries even further. We have beautiful projects. We currently have one called Música Sin Fronteras.
Okay, what is that one about?
And that one's literally about music, 20th century to now. So music here on the border. So we bring in Juarez, we bring in, I'm talking from like 1900 until present. And of course, big acts and big talent from here, from El Paso.
Which we have a lot of.
We have so much talent here, yeah, absolutely.
We actually do, and that's one of the things that I think is most important, that we as a community begin to understand that we do have a huge capacity as far as what creative people can do, but we don't, and I feel this very strongly, we don't have as a community a great understanding of what art is and the value that art brings us. Can you give us maybe an example, or maybe talk a little bit about how the community can grow by incorporating this concept of creativity and artistry?
Sure. Well, I'll use a current example. Currently, we have a very beautiful exhibition that was curated by our current curator. And she put together an exhibition called Dualidad.
Okay.
And it's basically about gender identity in the Southwest in Mexico. And so in it, it's predominantly art. So we have artworks, photography, to installation pieces, to costuming, to painting, and sculpture from queer artists that are indigenous, from Diné to Apache to Laguna Pueblo, and beautiful, beautiful pieces. And this is how we tell the story. On top of which we share the history of two-spirit and third-gender people from the Americas. And there's plenty of examples there. So not only do we have a few black and white photos with text panels that talk about them and their work, but we also have it juxtaposed against contemporary art. And we also have a lovely little education station that's a resource center, and also a space where you learn about different third gender and two-spirit folks globally. And it's a very lovely show, and it's one that I feel that you have to think outside the box to create. It pushes the boundaries, which is important. And it is also a really, really good example of how you utilize different different disciplines to tell a history.
And one of the things that I talk about in my class, because I teach art appreciation, is the historical element, obviously.
Sure.
We can't really understand who we are today unless we understand who we were back in the day, right? How in the world did everything unfold?
Yes.
And I feel like that's one of the aspects that you try to do through the exhibitions that you guys create, through the curating of exhibitions for the people. And one of the pieces that I appreciate anytime I walk into a museum, whether it be an art museum or a history museum or a natural history or anthropological, is the kind of hands-on element, which is one of the things that I see you guys do a lot of. How important is it for you guys to kind of make the connection between the visitors and the experience that they're having?
Well, that's, I mean, multisensory, right? We want to hear, we want to have something that's auditory. So a lot of times our exhibitions have sound. So you want to have, whether it's video sound or whether it's music, something that's going to set the mood, right? Music sets the mood. Then we also have lighting. So, and we have the visuals. And then, while I cannot give you the taste or the smell because we're a museum, I can give you the touch.
But you can give us the idea of
I
it.
can give you the idea of it, and you can, we like to have an education component so that you can actually interact with it. And so, for example, the Música Sin Fronteras exhibition has 3 little stations, one where you have a record player and that you can actually put the records on and listen to the records.
Cool.
Another little station has the cassette player.
Oh,
So
wow.
you can put in cassettes and see how it works. And of course you have the CD player, and then we have that. And I think it's really important, especially for kids now, right? Because Spotify, your phone, and that sort of thing. And they're like, what is this? I'm like, well, this is vinyl. What is this? This is a cassette. So it's kind of cool to see them play with it and to kind of change out the music and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's the equivalent of when I was in school, my teachers would always tell me, write it down, because as soon as you write it down, then you have another kind of sensory connection to what you're doing. Like if they say 2 + 2, you're thinking 2 + 2. But then when you write it down, then it's another way for you to connect with that thing. And it's interesting because you mentioned record players, and I actually, one time when I was teaching at UTEP, I had a student tell me, we were supposed to do creative work based on found objects, and then one of my students, I guess it was like 10 years ago, was like, well, my dad has all these black round things. I'm like, black round things? What are those? And she's like, I think they play music. I'm like, records? It was so foreign to her, yet for me it was so, present. But it's when they make that connection that I think they begin to learn, which I think is one of the most important aspects of what you guys do. And I appreciate the fact that you guys and I'm saying you guys as far as what you do at the museum itself, helps the people make that deeper connection, because I think that's one of the things that lacks. One of the things I wanted to talk about to you quickly is how important is for us to learn to understand the concept of art in our city, because I feel like we need to make a bigger connection in that way.
I think one of the things that you notice in other cities or in other places is that art, number one, is an economic driver. Okay.
That's one thing that we do not understand here.
And I sometimes I don't know if people understand that
I don't think.
That it is an economic driver, and on top of being, because it's something that connects with everyone. When you move to a city, you think about quality of life, and you think, well, what's the quality of life going to be there? What do they have for entertainment? What do they have that, that brightens my day? And guess what? Art touches everything.
Yes, it does.
And so here we are very, very rich in art. And we have a very vibrant mural scene.
Yes, we do.
We have a public art program that is just astounding, that gets awards year after year. We also have, of course, now we're building into our downtown arts district, right? So We're about to open the MAC. La Nube just opened. We have the Museum of Art. And then at the same place that we have the Mexican American Cultural Center is our spot. And then the Museum of Archaeology out in Trans Mountain, right, for a more nature type of experience. But I think people don't realize until they leave here, they're like, oh my God, hey, in El Paso, I had this, this, and this. Oh my God, they have this, they have all these murals. I understand that, but we have even more in El Paso.
So one of the things that I think is most interesting is that we don't really understand until we leave. Yeah. Then we come back and then we're like, oh my God, this stuff is important. So having said that, is there a piece of advice that you can give our viewers? Because I think it's important for them to kind of get something from our guests as far as anything is concerned, whether it be creative or life changing, so on and so forth.
I think it's important for viewers or for anyone to understand that art is everywhere. It touches everything. You don't think it does, but it does. It touches your life in some way. It impacts you in some way, whether it's that advertisement that you like, whether it's the content in social media that you keep on, following, or whether it's something in your house or in your neighborhood. It touches every aspect of your life.
So why not appreciate it, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Erica, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to come out here and talk to us. It was a pleasure having you. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And I wanted to thank everybody for joining us once again. Every time when we end our show, I want to invite you guys to contact me. You guys can contact Miguel Valenzuela at mvalen31@epcc.edu. I also want you guys to go onto YouTube and watch us on EPCC TV. You guys can also go to our Facebook, or you guys can go onto our Instagram. We welcome everybody to come in and watch our show. Thank you very much, and we'll see you guys next time.